25 Forgotten Wilderness Safe Room Tricks that buy survivalists critical time when danger finds their camp. Most survival guides teach you how to run, how to hide in a ravine, how to vanish into thick brush when something goes wrong out there. But what happens when you can't run? What if your injury is too severe, your group too vulnerable, or the threat moves faster than your legs can carry you? Here's what I'm going to show you: the counterintuitive techniques that old-time wilderness dwellers used not to escape danger, but to buy time. To transform a temporary camp into something that holds long enough for help to arrive, for an injury to stabilize, or for the threat to lose interest. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why the most critical skill isn't moving fast. It's staying put when it matters most. If you've spent time in the backcountry, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me about a moment when you had to decide, run or hold ground. Your story might just help someone else make that same choice under pressure. Wait, this is the part where I need to stop and tell you something crucial. If you're serious about mastering these techniques, the full mechanisms behind this topic, the signals, the patterns, the layered defenses that actually work, I've compiled all of that into an in-depth guide. You'll find it in the description and in the pinned comment. It's not free, and frankly, it shouldn't be. This is the material that separates someone who survives from someone who gets lucky. Let's start with something most modern campers miss entirely: site selection itself. When you're setting up for the night, your first instinct is usually elevation, higher ground, better views. And that's right, partially. But the old-timers understood something darker. They chose locations not just for what they could see, but for what could see them, and how long an approach would take. A camp nestled into a rock outcropping, with vegetation at your back and only one natural approach from the front, isn't just comfortable. It's designed to compress an attack into a predictable corridor. Everything that wants to reach you has to move through that space, and that space buys you time. Seconds, maybe minutes. In a crisis, that's everything. The silent perimeter wall comes next. You won't find this in modern camping manuals, because we've forgotten why it existed. Early wilderness camps, trading posts, remote hunting camps, settled territories, all had loose stone walls or earth berms surrounding them. Not high enough to block a determined person, but high enough to slow one down and to make noise as they crossed it. A person trying to slip through your camp after dark, crawling over a wall of stacked stone in the dark, makes a sound. That wall also marks the boundary psychologically. It says, "This is a space that was prepared, that was thought about." Humans are territorial creatures, even predatory ones. An unmarked camp is an easy target. A space with even modest boundaries triggers hesitation. Then there's the sound barrier. Not a solid wall, but an intentional scattering of dry branches, fallen wood, and forest debris arranged, not randomly, but deliberately, around the camp's outer edge. In full daylight, this looks unremarkable. Natural, no one notices it. But at night, or in low light when an intruder or predator tries to move through them, every step becomes a whisper, a crack, a rustling announcement. You're asleep 50 feet away, but the sound travels. A seasoned camper wakes to that before the threat is even close. Modern camps have zero of this. We bring rubber-soled boots and lightweight gear that makes no sound. We've optimized ourselves right out of our own defense. The trigger stick belongs in this conversation, though it requires careful handling in inhabited wilderness. It's ancient, simple. A thin branch balanced in such a way that any pressure, a person's shin, a large animal's shoulder, drops it and creates sound. Not a trap, just an alarm. The moment that stick falls, everyone in camp knows something crossed the line. You're not harmed. The visitor doesn't even have to know they've been announced. But inside the shelter, you've moved from sleep to readiness in the time it takes a branch to hit the ground. Light plays a role that most overlook. The natural human instinct when danger comes is to light a fire. More light means safety, we think. But an interior firelit shelter is a theatrical stage. Everything inside is visible to anything outside. Older wilderness camps often maintain their fires outside the perimeter, far enough away that the shelter itself remained dark. Inside, in shadow, they kept their most vulnerable people. Outside, near the fire, they stationed whoever could move fastest and see best. The fire became a barrier itself, heat, light, and psychological resistance, rather than a beacon that advertised the camp's contents. Placement of water sources matters too. A camp built next to a stream seems smart. Easy water, sound cover. But it's a mistake. Anything moving toward your camp in darkness will follow the water. Predators, human or animal, use waterways like highways. A secure camp sits above the water, visible to it, but not beside it. You have to walk down to drink. That walk has only one return path. It's a journey you make deliberately, in daylight, with the group intact. You don't sleep beside your own supply line. Human psychology shifts in darkness. Territory becomes sharper. Boundaries matter more. A camp that looks casual at noon feels like a fortified position at midnight. The question isn't whether these defenses will stop a determined threat. They won't. But they will make that threat choose differently. They will add friction. They will create time. And time is the one resource that keeps people breathing. Number 12 is one that people skip because it seems too simple. It's the escape route that isn't marked on any map but exists in every head in the camp. Before darkness falls, before anyone is tired or panicked, the group walks it. Not once, multiple times. Everyone knows where the tree marker is. Everyone knows which direction the creek runs. Everyone can find the secondary meeting point blindfolded if necessary. When danger arrives at night, people don't think clearly. They freeze or they run wrong. An escape route drilled into muscle memory in daylight becomes instinct when adrenaline takes over. A family that practiced their exit path 3 times will scatter in 3 different directions with confidence. A family that never discussed it will bunch up at the door, looking to one person to decide. That hesitation is often the difference. Number 11 uses the land itself as a barrier. Before you ever stake a tent, you study what nature has already built. A cluster of thorny brush becomes the northern wall. A split-rail fence or deadfall log marks the southern edge. Rocks jut from the ground on the east side. These aren't decorations. They're obstacles that slow approach. A person moving quickly toward a camp in darkness will hit them, will stumble, will make noise, will lose time. The camp that sits in open ground with nothing but a fire between it and the forest has no early warning. The camp that's nested inside natural barriers buys seconds. Those seconds let someone move a child, kick the fire apart, reach for a tool. In wilderness survival, you don't need to stop a threat, you need to slow it. Geology does that for free. Number 10 was discovered by accident during the Depression, when families were stretching every penny. A thin line of ash, swept in an arc from the fire pit outward in all directions, marked exactly how close an intruder had come during the night. You don't see it until morning. By then, you know someone was watching. You know which direction they came from. You know they stayed for a while or just passed through. Ash holds impressions like snow. A boot print, a knee mark, a dragged branch, all of it shows. The family didn't set up this defense to stop anyone. They set it up to know. Knowledge is the beginning of every response. You can't defend against something you don't know is there. Before we continue, I need to pull you back for a moment. The deeper patterns behind these techniques, the psychology of threat response, the geometry of camp placement, the subtle signals that separate safe camps from vulnerable ones, those are explained in complete detail in my survival guide, available in the description and pinned right at the top of the comments. That ebook breaks down the mechanics of each defense, the historical data on which ones actually stopped confrontations, and how to adapt these to your specific landscape. It's a reference you'll come back to. The guide goes where this video can only sketch. Number 9 is something modern people have almost entirely forgotten. A small noisemaker, a bell, a rattle, even dried beans in a tin, hung at ankle height on a wire across the most likely approach to camp. Nothing loud, just enough to announce a foot catching it in darkness. The appeal is precision. It doesn't alarm the camp unnecessarily. The family doesn't jump at every sound. The wire only triggers if something crosses that exact line in that exact spot. Wind won't set it off. Small animals won't reach it. Only something human-sized moving deliberately through the approach path will activate it. That's specificity. That's intelligence in design. Number 8 comes from a different kind of problem. A camp with only one direction to run is a trap. The best camps have 2 exits. Maybe it's a gap between trees on one side and a cleared run through open ground on another. Maybe it's a ravine you can climb down if necessary and a path up the ridge. The point is that danger narrows options. Every option taken away is a life restricted. A camp forced into a single exit becomes a bottleneck. People collide. Slower people get caught. The group fragments. Camps designed with at least 2 clear exit routes don't have that problem. You move in the direction that makes sense at that moment. You don't have to wait. You don't have to plan on the fly. Number 7 is about what you do with sound itself. Camps near water have the advantage of ambient noise. A stream running blocks other sounds. Wind through a gorge masks movement. But constant sound is its own problem. You become deaf to change. When the water stops, when the wind dies, You're suddenly in silence, and that silence wakes you. That's actually useful. Silence at night means something changed, something stopped. The predator that was using the noise cover paused. The intruder that was moving along the creek halted. Silence is often an alarm. The families that understood this didn't sleep through noise. They woke through change. They listened for the absence as much as the presence. Number 6 works with that same principle, but in reverse. You create deliberate sound zones around your camp. Not noise for noise's sake, but barriers that announce approach. Dry branches layered beneath windows or doorways. Loose stones arranged in paths you know by memory. Twigs placed at precise angles across animal trails leading toward your shelter. When something, or someone, crosses those lines, the sound is unmistakable. A deer will trigger it. A curious raccoon will trigger it. So will a human, moving with intention. The old trappers called this a pressure map of sound. Your camp became an instrument. You tuned it to your own movement patterns. You learned where you could walk silently. Everywhere else announced itself. A person unfamiliar with your camp would trip the alarm without knowing they'd done it. They'd assume they were being silent. They'd be wrong. Number 5 is about vertical space. Most people think about camps as ground-level arrangements. Doors, barriers, sightlines, all horizontal. But danger doesn't always come across the ground. Rain-swollen creeks flood camps in low areas. Animals climb. Intruders can scale structures faster than you'd think. The families who built long-term shelters didn't just fortify the perimeter. They created upper refuges. A loft accessible by ladder. A second story with its own exit. A roof platform reached by handholds deliberately placed only where you knew them. In 1923, a family in the Ozarks survived a flash flood because their cabin had a sleeping loft 8 feet above ground level. Everyone made it. Another family in the same region, living in a structure without that height, did not. Elevation saved them, not because they knew a flood was coming. They didn't. They built it because elevation meant you could see farther. You could spot approach from greater distance. And if the water came, if animals came, you had a fallback position. Height is survival. Number 4 involves the tools you keep staged around your shelter, not weapons. Tools. An axe leaning against the wall near the door. A hatchet hung where you sleep. Rope coiled and ready. Blankets folded in specific locations. Water containers positioned at the exit. This isn't about paranoia. It's about reducing the gap between knowing something is wrong and being able to respond. When your body wakes to danger, your mind is still half asleep. You have 5 seconds, maybe 10, before you need to act. You don't have time to search. Everything you might need must be within arm's reach. The families that survived threats weren't the ones with the best aim or the strongest grip. They were the ones who could move without thinking. Muscle memory. Preparation that made the first moments automatic. Wait, I need to be straight with you about something. This entire approach to building a truly defensible camp has layers most people never consider. And that's exactly why we created the complete guide on this. You'll find it in the description and pinned in the comments. That guide walks through every defensive principle we're covering here, plus the specific measurements, material lists, and the actual psychology behind how humans detect threats before they become problems. It's not just a list. It explains the mechanisms, the patterns, the signals your body picks up that your conscious mind hasn't processed yet. If you want to build a camp that protects you without being obvious about it, that guide goes 10 times deeper than what we can cover in a video. Number 3 comes down to what you do with light. A fire inside your shelter at night makes you visible from 100 yards away. The silhouette of a person moving past an open flame tells an observer everything. Numbers, positions, whether anyone's keeping watch. The families who understood defensive positioning didn't build fires inside their shelters. They built them outside, at distance. They kept the interior dark. When someone looked at their camp, they saw the light. They didn't see inside. Meanwhile, the people sheltering were in darkness, watching whoever approached the fire with complete night vision. This also meant the warm light outside was a trap. A person approaching the fire naturally moved toward it. They became visible to those watching from the shelter. Conversely, someone inside the shelter could see movement around the external fire clearly, while remaining invisible. Position and light became strategy. Number 2 is the one that surprises people most. It's about what you leave behind intentionally. Not your trash, not signs of habitation, but misleading signs. Old camps show evidence of long occupation. Scratches on door frames from repeated opening. Worn paths to the water source. Tool marks on wood from repeated use. These traces say the people here are comfortable. They've settled in. They're not moving. If you're building a temporary shelter in wilderness, sometimes the goal isn't to look lived in. It's to look abandoned. Recently abandoned. Like whoever was here left in haste or moved on weeks ago. You do this by leaving specific traces. Scattered ashes, a broken tool handle, signs of hasty departure that actually represent carefully controlled preparations. An intruder finding such a site assumes you're gone. The shelter's abandoned. There's nothing here. And you're actually inside, watching them reach that conclusion. That's when everything changes about how threats assess your position. Once they believe you're not there, their entire approach shifts. A threat that believes a shelter is empty stops looking for you inside it. They walk past. They search the perimeter. They call out to see if anyone answers. But they never actually enter the space because in their mind, there's nothing to find. The shelter becomes invisible through the appearance of abandonment. This is why old woodsmen built what they called ghost camps. Not camps for ghosts. Camps designed to be seen as ghosts. Empty. Forgotten. The kind of place a passing danger moves past without pause. You construct one by understanding a simple principle. Human beings read spaces through patterns. A space that looks recently inhabited triggers scrutiny. A space that looks recently abandoned triggers avoidance. The scattered ashes I mentioned earlier matter because they have a story. Fresh ashes suggest someone left yesterday or this morning. Cold ashes, mixed with dirt and scattered by wind, suggest departure from days ago. This distinction takes seconds to read and makes the difference between a shelter a person searches and one they skip entirely. A broken tool handle positioned near cold ashes tells a specific narrative. Someone tried to use it, it broke, they left it behind because they couldn't repair it here. Parallel that with other small failures. A ripped section of fabric, a cord that's been cut. These aren't signs of violence or emergency. They're signs of mundane, ordinary abandonment. Before we continue, keep this in mind for a second. The deeper mechanics of how wilderness threats evaluate your position, how they read the ground and the structure, how they make split-second decisions about whether to advance or retreat. These patterns are explained in complete detail in our Wilderness Defense Guide. You'll find it in the description and in the pinned comment. It's the resource that takes these individual tricks and shows you the unified system behind them. It's a paid guide, but it gives you the framework that ties all 25 of these methods together into something coherent instead of disconnected techniques. Now, positioning the shelter itself matters as much as the traces around it. Old survival literature calls this peripheral placement. The shelter isn't in the center of the clearing. It's set back, positioned so it's visible but not prominent. Someone passing through sees it, registers it as an old structure, and their mind categorizes it as a landmark rather than an active location. This is different from hiding a shelter, which actually draws more suspicion because a hidden structure makes people wonder what's being hidden. A visible but unremarkable shelter with signs of abandonment becomes something the human eye moves past. The eye registers it, but doesn't linger. The brain doesn't flag it for investigation. Weather damage enhances the ghost camp effect. A shelter with rain stains on the canvas, mold creeping up one corner, a corner stake that's pulled loose and hangs at an angle. These are the marks of age and neglect, and they're what convince someone that nothing here has seen recent use. Creating artificial weather damage is crude work, frankly, but it's the kind of thing that matters if someone's standing 30 feet away, trying to decide whether to approach. The presence of animal damage helps, evidence that small animals have nested in or around the structure. Droppings from birds or rodents, a torn section of material that looks like something larger got into it months ago. Animals wouldn't nest in or repeatedly return to a shelter where humans are actively present. Their presence screams abandonment. Timing is the final component. A ghost camp works best when it's been positioned during daylight hours, when someone approaching might see it from a distance and form an opinion before they get close. If you create the appearance of abandonment at night and a threat arrives at dawn, the consistency of the setup matters. Everything has to align. The ashes have to match the age the structure suggests. The broken tool has to be in a position that makes logical sense for someone who left in ordinary circumstances. This technique saved lives during periods when wilderness travel involved risk. A traveling family encountering what looked like an abandoned campsite would pass it by. They wouldn't stop to investigate. They wouldn't call out. They'd keep moving toward whatever actual destination they had in mind. The difference between a shelter that gets searched and a shelter that gets ignored sometimes amounts to the difference between survival and the opposite. Every ghost camp that successfully deflected attention was a structure that did its job before anyone ever opened the door. Now I need to deliver what I promised you at the beginning. The real secret behind all 25 of these tricks isn't about locks or barriers or clever design. It's something simpler and far more powerful. Every one of these forgotten techniques works because they're built on a single principle. They make your shelter invisible to danger, not physically invisible, psychologically invisible. A raider or a threat doesn't see a fortified camp. They see nothing worth stopping for. A ghost site that looks picked clean and abandoned poses no value and requires no risk. A reinforced door with a drop bar suggests a family with weapons and preparation inside. An intruder moves on. A concealed entrance means no obvious target. A gravel perimeter turns a quiet approach into an announced one. Danger avoids obstacles. It seeks easy opportunity. The families who survived the Depression, frontier attacks, and periods of genuine isolation didn't survive because they were strongest. They survived because threats passed them by. The invisible shelter gets left alone. The Shepherd family using signal stones communicated without drawing attention. The decoy setup made searchers think the real camp was somewhere else entirely. The ghost site looked so unpromising that it wasn't worth investigating. What made these techniques dangerous wasn't their complexity. It was their consistency. A competent threat assessed multiple signals before committing to stopping at a particular location. One signal could be coincidence. Multiple signals aligned suggested genuine abandonment or weakness. When every detail supported the story you wanted told, the shelter became transparent to danger. Modern survival training often focuses on defensive capability. Build stronger, lock tighter, prepare for confrontation. The old approach was different. Don't be the place worth confronting in the first place. Consider the reality of resource scarcity. An intruder or a desperate group making decisions under pressure looks for quick opportunity. A homestead that appears to offer nothing, that signals competence and readiness, that seems to have no vulnerability, that becomes invisible. The psychology works on nearly every level of threat. A casual drifter moves on. A organized raiders group reassess. Even wildlife responds to signals of occupancy and strength. The families who built these systems understood something we've mostly forgotten. Safety isn't about force. It's about never needing to use force in the first place. The best defense is the defense that never gets tested. The lock that never gets kicked because the intruder never tried. The gate that never gets breached because no one approached it. The hidden entrance that never gets discovered because no one knew to look. This is why those 25 techniques survived for generations. They weren't just practical, they addressed the core truth of survival in periods of real danger. When law enforcement couldn't respond in hours, when isolation meant genuine vulnerability, when every family had to be its own defense, the families that thrived weren't always the most armed or the most aggressive. They were the ones who understood threat psychology. They were the ones who made their camps invisible. You can apply this principle today, even if you're not facing Depression-era threats. A secure camp setup that looks abandoned is safer than one that broadcasts resources. A dwelling that signals competence and occupancy discourages casual intrusion. Subtle barriers that make approach difficult without being obvious about it work better than obvious fortifications that attract attention and curiosity. Take the next time you're setting up a temporary shelter in the wilderness. Lay your approach paths where they're visible and obvious. Use the gravel path principle. Make casual approach easy but announced. Keep your real shelter entrance subtle and less traveled. Stage your camp to signal that you're present, prepared, and aware. Don't hide, but don't broadcast either. Control what's visible and what's not. The challenge for this week is to look at your own shelter setup, whether it's permanent or temporary, and identify 3 signals you're currently broadcasting that you could redesign or conceal. Is your camp lit up at night when it could be darker? Is your entrance too obvious? Are your emergency supplies visible and therefore tempting? What story does your camp tell someone observing from outside? Because survival isn't always about what you build inside your shelter. It's about what someone decides when they're standing outside, looking in, deciding whether to approach. Thank you for watching all the way through. If this changed how you think about shelter security and camp invisibility, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss what we're uncovering next. Drop a comment below and tell me which of these 25 techniques surprised you most, or share a time when understanding threat psychology actually made a difference for you. We're building a community of people who think carefully about wilderness survival, and I'd love to hear your story.